Welcome back to the deep dive. Look, if there's one thing that's become really undeniably clear right now, it's that the whole global balance of power is, well, it's shifting big time.
Oh, absolutely. It's unmistakable.
Oh, we're not talking about just, tweaking things around the edges. This feels like a fundamental reordering, doesn't it? The old institutions, the ones born out of World War II,
Yeah.
they seem to be genuinely struggling.
They are struggling to represent the interests and, frankly, just the sheer demographics of the 21st century.
Yeah, it's like watching tectonic plates move. It's slow, maybe, but the impact, profound, and you can't really reverse it. And the key thing here, I think, is that these aren't just abstract ideas for academics to debate. These are real changes. They hit economies, trade, even our daily lives, yours included.
That's right. It connects directly to things people experience.
So today we're doing a deep dive into three big interconnected threads. We're drawing from a really timely source, Barackface, which literally just came out yesterday, August 7th, 2025.
Very fresh, yeah.
First up, we'll explore this bold, evolving vision for what a multipolar world order might actually look like, one that's pushing for a serious rebalancing of global influence. Then we're jumping straight into the deep end with the current pretty high-stakes trade dispute brewing between the U.S. and India.
Which is very much unfolding right now.
Exactly. And finally, we'll look at how all this external pressure, this turbulence, could actually be the spark, the catalyst for India's next major wave of economic reforms. It's a complex picture, definitely.
It is, but the connections are crucial.
That's why we're here. Okay, let's get into it.
What's really fascinating, I think, is how these pieces fit together. You've got global institutional reform, which sounds huge and abstract. Then you've got a specific bilateral trade spat, and then domestic economic policy inside India. They seem separate,
But they're not.
but they're absolutely woven together. And this forces us to ask some, well, pretty critical questions, doesn't it? Like, how could a new global order genuinely reflect today's world, not yesterday's? And could this U.S.-India trade thing, which seems like pure tension, could it paradoxically push India towards some deep internal changes?
Crisis as opportunity, maybe.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And the biggest question, maybe. What if India's response to all this doesn't just shape its own future, but actually influences the entire global economic landscape?
Wow.
Like, these aren't just thought experiments, right? Understanding these dynamics is pretty crucial for anyone trying to navigate, well, everything that's happening geopolitically and economically right now.
Absolutely. So let's start with that first piece, charting this idea of a new global order, and specifically looking at it through the lens of BRICS. Now, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. For a long time, it just felt like this, slightly dry term.
Yeah, an investment banker's acronym, basically.
Exactly, coined by Goldman Sachs, wasn't it? It was just a shorthand way to group these fast-growing economies for, financial report.
That's right. Its origins were purely practical economics, a way for investors to think about emerging markets with, high growth potential. But what's genuinely remarkable is how far it's come from that.
It really has.
Over the years, BRICS has, added new members, but more importantly, its ambitions have grown. It's really evolved into a significant geopolitical, movement, I suppose.
It's not just a spreadsheet category anymore.
Not at all. It's become a political statement.
And the source material really emphasizes this, doesn't it? That it's not just about economics anymore. It's driven by this deep-seated desire for a more, let's say, equitable world order.
A fairer shake.
Yeah. It's actively challenging the dominance of those traditional Western-led institutions, which, let's be honest, often feel like they reflect a world that doesn't quite exist anymore.
A post-1945 world, really.
So when a term that started out purely financial gains, this kind of geopolitical weight, what does that tell us about the underlying power shifts happening globally?
Well, it undeniably highlights the growing clout of non-Western economies, right?
Yeah.
And it reflects this collective desire from a big chunk of the world to just have their voices heard and their interests actually represented on the world stage.
Makes sense.
Think about the classic institutions, like the UN Security Council or the IMF, the World Bank.
Yeah.
They were largely designed by the winners of World War II.
Right.
And they reflect that 1945 status quo. It just doesn't map neatly onto the demographics or the economic power of the 21st century. BRICS, as it's evolving, is a direct pushback against that imbalance.
But, and this is important, the sources also say that even with its growth, BRICS is kind of at a crossroads.
That's a key point, yeah.
If it really wants to be effective, to lead in shaping the future, it needs a serious rethink. a redefinition almost. It needs to move beyond just being those 5 countries.
Exactly. It needs to transcend that original, somewhat limited identity.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The source lays out this idea of a rebirth for BRICS. It suggests 3 key things needed for it to become this, I guess, next generation global organization.
A fundamental transformation.
Yeah. A new name, a permanent headquarters, and a really bold new voting formula. It almost sounds like they're trying to build, I don't know, a UN 2.0, but starting from scratch with a different philosophy.
That's a good way to put it. It's a very conscious attempt to build something seen as more legitimate, more representative, especially by the global south and other emerging economies.
They want buy-in from a wider group.
Absolutely. Something that resonates far beyond just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Okay, let's unpack Pillar 1, a new name. The current name, BRICS, it's obviously too narrow, right? Too geographic, just an accident of history.
Completely accidental, yeah.
So if this new thing is going to be genuinely global, it needs a name that signals something different. Openness, inclusion, a bigger purpose maybe?
Exactly. It needs to speak to values, not just geography. Universal values.
And the proposed names really reflect that shift, don't they? They're throwing out things like GMO, Global Equitable Multipolar Organization.
Or Peace Partnership for Economic Autonomy, Cooperation, and Equity. That's quite a statement.
It is. Or WEO, World Equity Organization. Or GNP plus Global Nations Partnership plus. These aren't just acronyms anymore.
No, this is a deliberate rebranding. It's a statement of intent. A new name signals a new era, moving beyond just, economic convenience towards a mission driven by values. Values like justice, representation, and they even talk about rewriting the post-colonial global contract.
Wow, that's heavy.
It's about signaling the global vision, not just a bloc.
It's amazing how much weight a name carries, isn't it? You think about brands, companies, how a name frames your perception.
Absolutely.
And on a global scale, calling something the World Equity Organization immediately says something vastly different than just BRICS. It implies a whole moral foundation.
It really does. It signals a completely different philosophical starting point for global governance, which leads us straight into the second pillar they propose, a permanent headquarters.
Right. And they suggest Dubai.
Yes, Dubai.
And they make a pretty strong case for it. They talk about its location literally at the crossroads of Asia, Africa, Europe. That gives it a kind of neutrality.
Geographic neutrality is key.
And it's not just location. Dubai's got incredible infrastructure, right? Airports, communication hubs, everything you'd need for a global center.
Cutting edge, really. And the symbolism is also important. The source has this powerful line. It says, the world government of tomorrow, if it is to be born anywhere, can be born in Dubai.
That's quite a claim.
It is. It's not just about logistics. It's about signaling what's possible when you combine vision with serious investment. Plus, Dubai is seen as having pretty good diplomatic ties across the board, cordial relations with different geopolitical players. That makes it a good neutral ground for potentially difficult talks.
It really does challenge our usual thinking about where global power resides, doesn't it? We automatically think New York for the UN, DC for the IMF and World Bank.
The traditional centers.
Yeah. So picking a place like Dubai neutral, super modern, symbolically ambitious, and outside those traditional Western tower centers, that's a huge statement in itself.
It absolutely is. It signals a deliberate break from the past, an intention to build something that feels genuinely global in its neutrality, not just representing one bloc.
It speaks volumes about wanting to decentralize power, create something that doesn't feel like it's controlled by any one traditional group.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third pillar, which might be the most revolutionary part. The proposed 40-40-20 voting formula.
Okay, this sounds like a fundamental rewrite of how things work.
It is. It's designed to directly tackle the issue of disproportionate voting power in existing institutions, like the UN Security Council, which the sources bluntly call relics of a bygone era.
Strong words. So break down this 40-40-20 thing. How does it actually work?
Okay, so it tries to balance different kinds of national power and legitimacy. 40%. 40% of a country's vote weight comes from its GDP contribution, its economic size.
Okay, economic clout gets a big say.
Right. Then another 30%, 40%, is based on its share of the global population.
So sheer number of people matters just as much.
Exactly. And the final 20%,
Yeah.
20% is based on the principle of one country, one vote, basically sovereign equality.
Ah, okay. So 40% money, 40% people, 20% every country gets an equal say just for being a country.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting mix. It gives a real voice to countries with huge populations but maybe less economic power currently.
That's precisely the point. The GDP part recognizes economic contribution. The population part directly addresses the, frankly, decades of underrepresentation of populous nations, especially in the global south. They have huge numbers of people, but often limited power in current institutions.
Right.
And that 20% for sovereign equality means that even the smallest nations still have a baseline voice, preserving their dignity and legal standing. No one gets completely shut out just because they're small or less wealthy.
So, connecting this to the bigger picture, this formula is a direct challenge to that 1945 setup, isn't it? Like the UN Security Council, where the permanent members and their veto power reflect a reality from nearly 80 years ago.
It's a direct challenge. It's a deliberate attempt to create a system where, as the source puts it, no one actor dominates.
Which you'd need for genuine multipolarity.
Absolutely. Instead of power concentrated in a few hands, this structure theoretically encourages coalition building. You need diplomacy, compromise among a much wider range of countries to get things done. It's just the dynamic from hierarchy to something more collaborative. At least that's the vision.
And the final piece of this vision is open membership, unlike, say, the G7, which is an exclusive club.
Or even the current BRICS model.
Right. This new organization should be open to all interested countries, but not unconditionally, right? There are some core principles they have to sign up for.
Yes, and those principles are key to its identity. They include things like economic cooperation based on mutual benefit, not exploitation. A strict adherence to non-intervention and respecting sovereignty, which is huge for many countries. A commitment to global peace, and importantly, climate justice. And finally, building a more inclusive international financial system.
So the goal isn't to create another rival bloc to fight the West.
According to the source, no. The aim isn't to divide the world further, but to rebalance it. To emerge as a democratized counterweight to the Western-dominated institutions. Essentially, to become an equal partner in managing global affairs for the 21st century.
It's a seriously ambitious vision, trying to tackle these long-standing complaints about fairness and representation, but this grand idea isn't happening in a quiet laboratory, is it?
Not at all.
It's clashing head-on with existing power structures, as India is finding out right now. Which brings us squarely to the second major thread. This very real, very immediate trade dispute heating up between the U.S. and India.
A real-world test case, in a way.
You could say that, and it's quite a test. We're talking about the U.S. President, Donald Trump, recently imposing a hefty 25% tariff on a range of Indian exports.
And threatening more.
Yeah, threatening to jack it up to 50% and add other penalties. The stated reason: India buying Russian oil, which Trump says is fueling the war machine in Ukraine. This all seems to have blown up in July and August 2025, with the 50% threat formalized in an executive order just yesterday, August 6th.
That's a significant escalation. And these aren't minor tariffs on obscure goods. They're targeting major Indian export sectors.
Like what specifically?
We're talking pharmaceuticals, that's about $8.1 billion worth. Telecom instruments, around $6.5 billion. Precious stones, another $5.3 billion. These are core parts of India's export economy.
Because this isn't just a warning shot, it's a broadside.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it forces this critical question about fairness, about geopolitics, and just the sheer complexity of global energy markets right now, especially with the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Okay, so what does this actually mean on the ground for India? We know India's economy is growing fast, but it's also hugely reliant on imported energy, right?
They are massively reliant. India is the world's third largest oil importer and consumer. Over 85% of its crude oil needs are met through imports. That's a huge vulnerability.
85%.
Yeah. And here's the context for the Russian oil. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Western sanctions led Russia to offer its oil at steep discounts to find new buyers.
Right, they needed the cash flow.
Exactly. And India, like China, saw a strategic and economic opening.
No.
Before the war, India got maybe 2.5% of its oil from Russia. Pretty small.
Okay.
By 2024, that number had jumped dramatically. We're talking 35 to 39% of its total oil imports coming from Russia. That's around 1.75 to 2 million barrels per day.
That's a massive shift, and the motivation was primarily the discount.
Primarily, yes. It saved India literally billions of dollars. That helped stabilize domestic fuel prices, which is politically crucial in India, and it also boosted profits for major Indian refiners like Reliance Industries and Nayara Energy.
And here's the twist, right? These refiners aren't just using the oil domestically. they're exporting the refined products.
That's the kicker. They export refined products like gasoline and diesel globally, and a significant chunk of that actually ends up in Europe.
In Europe. So countries imposing sanctions are indirectly buying refined Russian crude via India.
It certainly looks that way, yes, which makes India's defense of its position even more interesting.
What is their main argument? How are they pushing back against these tariffs?
Well, the Indian Foreign Ministry, and particularly the Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri, have been quite vocal. Their core argument is, look, firstly, these purchases were actually encouraged or at least implicitly accepted by the U.S. itself initially.
Encouraged. How so?
They point to statements back in 2023 from the U.S. ambassador to India at the time, Eric Garcetti. He publicly acknowledged that India buying Russian oil actually helped stabilize global energy markets. It prevented a massive price spike, potentially avoiding oil hitting, say, $130 a barrel, which would have hurt everyone, including the U.S.
So the argument is, we were actually helping global stability, as you yourselves acknowledged.
Precisely. And secondly, India maintains its imports are compliant with the G7's own price cap mechanism. The cap was set at $60 per barrel, designed to limit Russian profits while keeping oil flowing. India says its average purchase price is well below that, around $47.60.
So they're saying, we're playing by the rules you set up.
Exactly. We're buying within the cap, and we help prevent a global price shock, which, as you said, makes the U.S. tariffs now, especially Trump's fueling the war machine rhetoric, seem, well, inconsistent at best.
Or hypocritical, some might say. If India followed the rules and even got a nod from the U.S. for stabilizing markets, why punish them now?
That leads directly to the core of India's countercharge, hypocrisy. They point out quite forcefully that the U.S. and the EU themselves continue to have significant trade with Russia.
Oh, really? What kind of trade?
Well, in 2024, U.S.-Russia trade was still worth $5.2 billion. That included $3 billion in imports of strategic goods. The U.S. needs things like uranium for nuclear power, palladium for catalytic converters, fertilizer.
Uranium. They're still buying Russian uranium.
Yes. And get this. In the first 5 months of 2025, U.S. imports from Russia actually surged by 23%. Palladium imports were up 37%, uranium up 28%.
Wow. And the EU.
The EU's trade with Russia in 2024 was even larger, around $67.5 billion. That's roughly $78 billion. This included a record amount of Russian liquefied natural gas, LNG, over 16 million tons, plus fertilizers, nickel, steel, things the EU economy relies on.
So India's argument is basically, you guys are still buying billions worth of stuff from Russia, including energy and strategic materials, often carving out exemptions for yourselves, but you're hammering us for buying discounted oil, which is critical for our 1.4 billion people.
That's exactly the point. Economist Jayati Ghosh called it ridiculous double standards. She argued the Western trade is often for less critical needs compared to India's fundamental requirement for affordable energy to power its development. The U.S. and EU have clearly prioritized their own strategic needs while criticizing India for doing the same.
Which raises the question, what's the real motive behind Trump's tariffs then? Is it purely about Ukraine? Or is there something else going on?
That's the big debate. Some analysts in India, like Biswajit Dar, suggest it might be leverage. Maybe Trump wants concessions from India in a broader trade deal, particularly on agriculture, where India maintains high tariffs to protect its farmers.
Using the oil issue as a bargaining chip for something else entirely.
Possibly. Others think it might be a less calculated, broader attempt to just try and choke off Russian oil revenue completely, even if it risks driving up global prices, which seems counterintuitive to some of Trump's other stated goals.
Whatever the motive, the geopolitical fallout seems potentially huge, right? India sees itself as a key U.S. partner, especially in the Indo-Pacific.
Absolutely. Ties have deepened significantly through things like the Quad, or the grouping of the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India, specifically formed as a counterweight to China's growing influence. You see comments online reflecting this. Users like at CloudWatch199 arguing India's oil buys are strategic necessity, not disloyalty. Another, Navroop Singh, highlights India's efforts to lower trade barriers elsewhere, suggesting they want cooperation.
But this kind of aggressive action, the tariffs, the rhetoric, it risks pushing India away, doesn't it? Alienating a crucial partner right when cooperation in the Indo-Pacific seems more important than ever.
It definitely risks that. And India's shown it won't just roll over. Its refusal to buckle on demands regarding agriculture or buying F-35 jets shows it will prioritize its own national interests, even under pressure.
And where does Russia fit into this? Are they trying to capitalize?
Well, Russia is certainly playing it up. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov publicly criticized Western efforts to interfere in trade ties, essentially backing India's position. This whole situation could inadvertently push India closer to Russia and its other BRICS partners, ironically complicating the very U.S. strategy aimed at isolating Moscow.
It just highlights how complex these relationships are in a multipolar world. Actions have unintended consequences, and the economic hit for India could be serious if this drags on.
Oh, definitely. Billions in export revenue are at risk, key industries disrupted. And if they're forced away from discounted Russian crude, their refiners face higher costs, which could feed into domestic inflation. It's a significant economic pressure point.
Okay, so intense external pressure. But as we hinted before, the sources suggest this challenge, this pressure, might actually be a turning point, an opportunity for India to look inwards and spark something big internally.
Exactly. This leads us right into that fascinating idea of India potentially facing another 1991 moment.
Right, the 1991 moment. You hear that phrase used a lot regarding India. Can you just remind us what exactly happened back then? It sounds like a real watershed year.
Oh, it absolutely was. 1991 was the year India faced a catastrophic balance of payments crisis. They were literally weeks away from defaulting on their international debt. Foreign exchange reserves had dwindled to almost nothing.
Wow.
On the brink.
Totally on the brink. Before 91, India's economy was very closed off, heavily regulated under what was called the license Raj. It was this incredibly complex web of permits, licenses, regulations that basically strangled private enterprise.
Sounds stifling.
It was. But in 91, the crisis forced their hand. They had no choice but to undertake truly bold liberalization reforms just to survive.
And what did those reforms look like? What changed?
It was a massive shift. They slashed import tariffs dramatically, dismantled large parts of the license Raj, deregulated industries, devalued the rupee significantly. Essentially, they opened India up to the global economy. So it was the moment India pivoted from being this closed, state-controlled economy towards the emerging market powerhouse we see today.
That's exactly it. It was the turning point. And the key phrase from 1991 is no choice. It was reform born out of absolute necessity, a crisis that ultimately became a catalyst for transformation.
It's a powerful example of how external shocks, even really bad ones, can force fundamental internal change. You often see that, right? In nations, even in our own lives sometimes. Crisis forces a rethink.
It breaks inertia.
So how does that 1991 scenario, that forced opening up, compare to what India's facing in 2025 with these trade issues and the shifting global scene? Are there parallels?
There are some really striking parallels the sources draw out. First, you have that external shock. In 91, it was the payments crisis. Today, in 2025, it's these tariff shocks and shifting global trade alignments. You've got the lingering effects of the U.S.-China trade war, and now these direct U.S. tariffs on India over Russian oil. The external pressure is intense.
Okay, so external shock is one parallel. What else?
Structural bottlenecks. Back then, the big one was the license Raj. Today, India still faces significant internal hurdles, though they're different.
What are the main ones now?
Things like acquiring land for industry, which is still notoriously complex and slow in many areas. The legal system, while improving, can still be very slow, especially for resolving commercial disputes. And infrastructure, while much better, still has gaps and bottlenecks, particularly in logistics.
So different bottlenecks, but still things that hold back large-scale investment and efficiency.
Exactly. They impede the ease of doing business, especially for manufacturing.
But alongside the shock and the bottlenecks, there's also a parallel in terms of the opportunity window, right? In 91, the opportunity was just to survive by opening up. What's the big opportunity today?
Today, the opportunity is arguably much bigger. It's the chance for India to really cement itself as a trusted global manufacturing and services hub. This is driven by that whole China plus one trend we talked about.
Right. Companies actively looking to diversify away from China.
Exactly. Multinationals are looking for alternatives. India, with its size, democracy, and location, is a prime candidate to capture a huge slice of that relocated high-value manufacturing if it can tackle those internal bottlenecks quickly through reform. It's a massive potential prize.
Okay, but here's the really critical difference, isn't it? In 1991, India was desperate, broke, operating on fumes. What's the economic picture today? Is it really a crisis in that same sense?
No, and that's the absolute crucial distinction. It changes the entire dynamic. Today, India's macroeconomic fundamentals are far, far stronger.
How so?
Well, for starters, they have over $650 billion in foreign exchange reserves. That's a huge cushion compared to having just weeks worth in 91. Inflation is relatively stable, especially compared to many emerging markets, and is consistently one of the fastest growing large economies in the world.
So 2025 isn't about desperation.
Not at all. It's not a crisis forcing their hand out of sheer survival instinct like 1991 was. Instead, it's framed as an opportunity, a chance for India to proactively choose to transform, to move from just being a resilient survivor to potentially becoming a rule maker in the global economy.
So it's a strategic choice driven by ambition rather than a desperate reaction driven by fear.
Precisely. That reframes the entire situation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So why is this specific moment, the trade friction, the global shifts, why is this seen as such a unique launchpad? What are the ingredients that make now the time for potentially another wave of major reforms?
The sources argue this turbulence, this external pressure, could be the political trigger needed to push through reforms aimed at achieving something truly ambitious. Sustained double-digit growth. There are maybe three key factors converging right now.
Okay, what's the first one?
We touched on it. That global supply chain realignment, the China Plus One strategy, is real. Companies are looking to diversify manufacturing away from China due to risks, costs, and vulnerabilities we've seen exposed recently.
And India is well-positioned to benefit.
Hugely well-positioned. If India can improve its business environment, streamline land acquisition, simplify labor laws, upgrade logistics, it can attract a massive amount of this relocating high-value manufacturing. We're talking a potential multi-trillion-dollar shift over time.
That's huge. Okay, factor two.
India's digital and data advantage. This is unique. They possess what the source calls the world's most advanced digital public infrastructure.
You mean things like Aadhaar, the digital ID,
Right.
and UPI for payments.
Exactly. Aadhaar, UPI, and also ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, which is like an open source challenger to platforms like Amazon. These systems have already revolutionized India's domestic economy, bringing millions into the formal financial system, enabling instant payments, democratizing e-commerce.
How does that become an international advantage?
The idea is to scale this globally.
Yeah.
Export the model, export the technology, position India as a leader in building the infrastructure for the global digital economy. The source suggests this could unlock trillions in value. It's a unique national asset.
Okay, fascinating. And the third factor?
Demographics. India has that famous demographic dividend, a huge young workforce.
But that's only an advantage if they have jobs and skills, right?
Exactly. A young population is a massive asset if skill development matches industry needs. India needs to ensure its education and training systems are churning out people with the practical skills needed for modern manufacturing, tech, and services. If they get that alignment right, the demographic potential is enormous. If they don't, it could become a burden.
So putting it all together, you've got global companies looking for new manufacturing hubs, India having this unique digital infrastructure ready to scale, and this massive young workforce that needs skilling.
You add to that a large and growing domestic market, a democratic system, and a strategic location.
It really does paint a picture of a unique window of opportunity, doesn't it? A chance for India to become that attractive alternative in a world that feels increasingly fractured.
It absolutely could be. The stage seems set for India to not just react, but to proactively leverage this moment to reshape its own economy and maybe even influence the global economic order, which takes us right into the really ambitious part, the actual blueprint for reform laid out in Barackface.
Right. This is where it gets concrete. We're moving beyond the why and the what if to the how. The sources outline this detailed India 2025 reform manifesto, and the goal is staggering. Push India towards sustained 10% plus growth, hit a $10 trillion economy potentially before 2035.
And become a dominant player in global manufacturing, services, digital, green growth. The ambition is off the charts.
What's striking is how detailed it is, right? It's not just slogans, it's a phased roadmap.
Exactly. It's phased with specific actions, timelines, and even projected outcomes. They break it down into immediate actions, then deep structural reforms, then a global competitiveness push, and finally, anchors for inclusive and resilient growth. It reads like a serious plan to turn India into a primary engine of the global economy.
Okay, let's dig into phase one, the immediate stuff, 0 to 12 months out. The goal seems to be signal serious intent, clear some immediate roadblocks, get investment flowing quickly. What are the key moves here?
First up is trade and investment liberalization 2.0. This means bold moves like slashing average industrial tariffs, think from around 13% down to under 7%, and really fast-tracking those free trade agreements with key partners, the EU, UK, ASEAN, the Gulf states.
Get those deals done.
Yeah. Plus, opening up foreign direct investment caps further in high-tech areas and green sectors to pull in capital and know-how. These are designed for quick impact to tell the world we're serious.
That would definitely send a signal. What about land, that perpetual headache for manufacturers?
They propose a national industrial land bank. The idea is to digitize and essentially pre-approve large tracts of land, over 100,000 acres mentioned, clearing environmental and legal hurdles up front. Make it available with GIS maps so companies can find and acquire land much faster.
Streamlining that process would be huge. And the legal system. Businesses hate uncertainty and delays there.
Absolutely critical. So, a commercial courts overhaul. This means setting up dedicated fast-track benches in high courts specifically for commercial disputes, with a strict mandate to resolve cases within 6 months.
6 months, that would be revolutionary.
It'd build immense confidence if they could achieve it. Then there's logistics cost, another big drag.
How do they tackle that quickly?
A logistics cost reduction kickstart. Things like abolishing those annoying state-level checkpoints that cause delays and add costs for trucking, piloting a single-window electronic permit system for moving goods across state borders, just cutting red tape.
Practical stuff.
And finally, leveraging India's fintech strength. Fintech-driven credit expansion. Use UPI credit and ONDC credit to push more loans to small and medium businesses, MSMEs. Maybe offer some first loss guarantees on digital loans to encourage banks to lend more. Get credit flowing.
Okay, so phase one is really about these quick wins, tangible changes to build momentum and show they mean business. What kind of immediate impact do they project?
The manifesto estimates these phase one actions alone could boost GDP by about plus 1.8% over the baseline in the first year, 2025-26. That's a pretty powerful kickstart.
It is, but real transformation needs digging deeper, right? Which brings us to phase two, deep structural reforms planned for years 1 through 3. This is about tackling those really ingrained problems, holding back scale and productivity.
Exactly. This is the heavier lifting. First on the list is labor law modernization. This is always contentious but crucial.
What does that involve?
Consolidating India's many complex labor laws into a single, hopefully simpler, digital platform for compliance. Crucially, expanding the use of fixed-term contracts to give businesses more flexibility in hiring for projects or fluctuating demand. And importantly, pairing that with portable benefits for workers, so things like Social Security follow the worker, not the job.
Trying to balance flexibility with security. Okay, land titling also comes up again here.
Yes, going deeper. Completing the digitization of land records across all states and enabling a secure, possibly blockchain-based system for property titles. This is fundamental for reducing disputes, unlocking land value, and giving investors certainty. It's complex, needs state cooperation, but vital.
And infrastructure, beyond the quick fixes.
Infrastructure acceleration. This means finishing massive ongoing projects like the dedicated freight corridors for rail freight, seriously upgrading the top 20 ports to handle much larger volumes efficiently, and aggressively expanding EV charging infrastructure, tripling it to support the green transition.
Big, expensive projects, but necessary for scale. What about the people part, the skills gap?
Addressed through education industry integration. Launching a big national apprenticeship guarantee scheme, and mandating that universities reserve a chunk of seats, 10%, is suggested for programs directly sponsored by industry to teach needed skills.
Connecting education directly to jobs.
That's the aim. And finally, in this phase, deepening the financial markets with corporate bond market expansion, allowing pension funds to invest more in corporate bonds, creating a centralized exchange. Basically making it easier for companies to raise long-term debt domestically.
Okay, phase two is clearly tackling some tough, long-standing issues. It requires real political will. What's the projected impact by the end of year 3?
The cumulative GDP boost from phase 1 and 2 together is projected at plus 4.5% over the baseline. That's a significant acceleration building over 3 years.
Impressive. Now, phase 3, the global competitiveness push for years 3 to 5. The goal here sounds even more ambitious. Make India the most competitive place to invest among large economies.
This is about moving from catching up to leading. A key part is next-gen trade integration. This includes the bold idea of India actually joining the CPTPP trade bloc.
Whoa, the Trans-Pacific Partnership successor. That would be huge.
It would be a massive signal of commitment to open trade. Plus, negotiating new, modern bilateral investment treaties with India's top 10 sources of foreign investment, all aimed at making India a hyper-connected, attractive hub.
And leaning into the green economy trend.
Definitely. A green industrial revolution, establishing perhaps 10 dedicated green manufacturing zones with guaranteed renewable power, super strict environmental standards like zero liquid discharge, and offering green tax credits, aiming to attract the next generation of sustainable industries.
And tackling that old problem of too much red tape.
With a novel idea, a regulatory sunset commission, an independent body whose whole job is to constantly review existing business regulations and recommend repealing outdated or unnecessary ones every single year.
Keeping the rulebook lean and modern. I like that.
And doubling down on the digital advantage with digital trade leadership. Actively exporting the ONDC and UPI models as global standards through international agreements, trying to set the rules for digital trade.
And making the courts even faster.
Using tech, judicial AI integration. Deploying AI tools to help with case scheduling, legal research, basically streamlining processes in commercial courts even further.
Okay, phase 3 is really about planting India's flag as a global leader. The projected cumulative impact by the end of year 5.
Now we're talking a cumulative GDP boost of plus 8.5% over the baseline. That's getting into serious transformation territory, potentially putting India into a completely different economic weight class.
But growth isn't everything if it's not shared or sustainable, right? That brings us to phase 4, inclusive and resilient growth anchors. These run continuously.
Yes, these are ongoing efforts woven throughout the plan. They're crucial for ensuring the benefits reach everyone and the economy can withstand shocks. This includes social protection modernization.
Like what?
Universalizing direct benefit transfers, DBT, for essentials like food and fuel subsidies, maybe even exploring basic income floors, using that digital infrastructure to deliver a strong safety net efficiently.
And preparing for climate change impacts.
A dedicated climate adaptation fund, $1 trillion mentioned, which is significant, focused on things like making agriculture more resilient to weather extremes and flood-proofing cities. Practical adaptation measures.
Plus, boosting long-term innovation.
A big push on R&D investment, targeting 2.5% of GDP spent on research and development by 2030. That's crucial for moving up the value chain. And finally, tapping into the diaspora with diaspora investment bonds to raise maybe $50 billion specifically for infrastructure projects.
Connecting the overseas Indian community directly to national development?
Exactly. These inclusive and resilience measures are projected to add another 1.5% or so to GDP potential, but more importantly, they make the growth sustainable and politically viable long-term.
So let's put it all together. The total potential boost from all 4 phases, if India really goes for this, starting now.
The combined effect, according to this manifesto, could push India's annual growth rate consistently into the 10–11% range for a sustained period later this decade.
Double digit.
Double digits. The total cumulative boost is projected at plus 16.3% over the baseline by 2030. That translates to adding an extra $1.63 trillion to India's GDP by then. It's the difference between being a fast-growing economy and becoming a true global growth engine.
That is breathtakingly ambitious. Okay, let's try and wrap our heads around all this. We've covered a huge amount today, from the need for a new, fairer global order.
And the specific proposals for how that might look.
Right, to the immediate sharp shock of this U.S.-India trade dispute over Russian oil.
Highlighting the real-world pressures and complexities.
And then finally, this incredibly detailed, bold vision for how India could use this very moment of pressure as a launchpad for its own economic transformation. A potential second 1991 moment.
It's striking how interconnected it all is, isn't it? The global shifts, the bilateral friction, the domestic policy response. They're all feeding into each other.
Absolutely. The external pressures, whether it's the big tectonic shifts in global power or these direct trade tariffs, they really seem to be acting as catalysts, potentially forcing India's hand, or at least giving political cover for bold internal change, pushing India to seize this moment.
The sources definitely frame it that way. The world is undeniably changing fast. India stands at this clear crossroads. It faces a choice, really.
Play defense or offense.
Exactly. You can play defense, react to the terror shocks, try to manage the geopolitical buffeting, or it can go on the offensive with this incredibly ambitious reform agenda, the most comprehensive proposed since '91. History, it seems, has given India another opening.
This whole deep dive drawing on Barackface paints such a vivid picture of a world in serious flux. Old rules breaking down, new ones being written, or at least fiercely debated.
And India, whether it fully intends to or is pushed into it, seems powerfully positioned to be a central author of those new rules.
Or at least a major negotiator.
A major negotiator, definitely. And connecting this back to the bigger picture. India's choices now could really shape the trajectory of multipolarity itself. Will its response contribute to a more fragmented world, more trade wars, competing blocs?
Yeah.
Or could it help nudge things towards that vision of a multipolar world of cooperation, the kind envisioned by those proposals for a reformed global governance structure?
Mm.
The path India takes, and crucially, how the established powers respond with consistency and cooperation or with more friction will have huge implications for everyone.
That really does leave us with a final, pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? In this era where power is shifting so dramatically, what responsibility do the established global powers actually have? Should they be fostering cooperation, trying to build bridges to manage this transition smoothly? Or is it inevitable they'll keep stoking competition?
And how will their actions today affect the ability of rising powers like India to build that cooperative world instead of just sleepwalking into a new kind of Cold War?
Yeah. And what role do you, listening to this, think things like consistency, fairness, maybe shared values, what role do they play in trying to navigate these incredibly complex global relationships? Something to definitely mull over as we watch all this continue to unfold.